So, what type of questions are we going through?
Mainly it's just legislation policies that are coming up. For instance, like your sponsorship on the Stand Your Ground law. There was some people that were actually asking if you supported it. Of course, I looked it up and I was like, oh wait, he sponsored it. So I decided to have a better answer and question for that, which was basically, here we go. Since you sponsored HB 24, which is the supposed new Stand Your Ground law, do you think it will still pass with the most original wording after all the recent events involving high-profile shootings that have happened across our nation? Or will it face major revisions, in your opinion?
Nope, it's going to go pretty much like it is right now.
Okay, well, I'm pretty sure a lot of people in our district are going to be happy about that. Same with myself. Are you planning any new bills that will affect the way the state will handle the Second Amendment rights?
I'm not. I'm watching the bills that are out there, and I'm co-sponsored on a few of them. But right now, I've got my hands full with budgets. My co-chairs asked me to do the HES budget, Health and Social Services, which is $2.7 billion, which is by far the largest budget in the state, and DOT's budget. So between the two of them, I've got about 40% of the operating budget. So that and the other bills that I've got currently going, the Knickarn Bridge bill, and then a bill on knife rights, and a few others in the mix right now that keep me pretty busy.
Yeah, I haven't heard about the one on the knife rights actually. What's that one about? Just wondering.
Well, the 82% of all the knives now are an easy open knife or kind of a one-handed knife. Well, there's been 2 instances in our state Supreme Court where there's kind of been a little hiccup in there because there's no definitions in statute of what those knives are, as opposed to a switchblade.
Yeah.
And so what we don't want is Alaskans getting arrested, by a police officer or stopped by a police officer and saying, hey, you've got a deadly weapon, because these aren't identified. So we're trying to protect people's rights. And in fact, there's discussions going on where we may just remove all restrictions on all knives. I've talked to the Commissioner of Public Safety about that. He's got no problems with it and doesn't see how that would be an issue. We've got the right to carry a concealed handgun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why do we have restrictions on what type of knife you can carry? But,
Yeah.
But there has been, again, a couple of Supreme Court cases where, that's been challenged in court because people have been wrongly arrested because of that. So we're trying to protect their rights.
Well, that's very good news. More on the finance side. What changes to the oil taxes do you think should happen since there has been a big thing in the news as of late?
Well, we need to reduce government take in one way or another, and we need to simplify it. And I've got my own versions on how I think we could move forward on that. In a nutshell, whether it's oil or gas, they're both energy producing components that are sold in a global market based on their BTU value. They're sold on how much energy they have. That's their value. So why aren't we taxing them accordingly? Right now we've got gas taxed under a GIA taxed at the same rate as oil. So we've got something that's worth $3 and something that's worth $110. It's like taxing pit run and gold at the same rate. It's just crazy. Yet we're trying to get these gas pipeline built. How are they ever going to go towards a GIA with that huge tax on a product that's actually we would lose money? The available standard deductions are about $4, and if the price of Henry Hub's only $3, we'd have to pay to sell our gas.
Okay.
It's just wrong. So you got something high value, low value, because they're connected in our tax system. So if you go to different fields or unitized fields, right now our statutes say that they're identified at point of production. So you've got different gas wells within a field where they come together before they go to the gas treatment facility. I think that right there is where they should estimate the value on a BTU base on what that field develops. If it's 90% oil 10% gas, it should be taxed more than if it's 90% gas and 10% oil. You know, because we already know what those calculations are, we already know what those combinations are, and just base it on what it's worth on a global value. You know, to me, that's simplifying. It would decouple oil and gas and allow for the standard allowable deductions in our tax fuels. So I'm trying to think, the easy stuff is gone, Daniel, so you got to think outside the box.
Yeah.
You know, on a lot of the stuff. What the governor's proposing is okay. You know, I think a lot of the tax credits, and I haven't had a chance to really get into looking at that because I've been so busy on the budget so far and spend the majority of my time on that. Overall, you know, we'll take a look at it. You know, I think it's going in the right direction, but, you know, credits, I think we have too many credits out there right now for companies that are doing exploration credits that they get all this money from the state with no intent of ever drilling a well anyhow and developing it, because our tax credits for exploration are so great. So they go out there and get all these tax credits for exploration, but without any plans for actually developing a well. So what's the state's net back on that?
Barely anything if they haven't.
If they're not losing any oil. So yeah, that's one of the things I think we need to look at. You know, and the governor's bill looks at that. I don't know what the tax rates, you know, how we're going to be doing that. And, bottom line is, I think we need to simplify it, and you know, I've got some ideas on how to do that.
All right. Actually, you already covered that question, which was, do you think it'd be better to create a tax incentive? Oh, well, actually, this is a little bit slightly different, but sort of you went over. Do you think it would be better to create a tax incentive for Alaska-owned businesses to try and get involved in drilling new oil wells?
Yes, in fact, I've actually introduced legislation in the past that would allow for a tax of our oil and gas that's produced right now. It's at this 25% plus progressivity tax, but trying to get them to use it in state to create jobs for Alaskans out of our resources. And in the past, and it's always died in the resource committee, and I know that there's not enough support right now, so I haven't introduced it again, but essentially would say there would be a 5% or 7.5% tax, 5% tax on all oil and gas produced in the state that's used for added value within the state.
All right.
So that would include Alaskan companies that figure out ways to use that oil and that gas. If they're getting that, why should we pay those high, they shouldn't pay a high tax on that, they should get a reduced tax. That would incentivize more companies to move to Alaska, or Alaska companies to use our resources to create jobs for Alaskans. So it's more about creating jobs for Alaskans than it is income revenue for the state.
All right. Also, we've been going through possible, pretty much sort of like a gas shortage scare kind of thing going on with the Matsu Valley, Anchorage Borough area, where we are already starting to set up checks and balances in case we do have an issue where we run out of gas or we run extremely low on gas. This question is based off of, what do you think about using legislation about influencing geothermal energy harvesting, since most of southern Alaska rests on major fault lines?
Well, we put about $20 million into a company. The company name was Ormat, I believe. Was here a couple of years ago, got $20 million in capital. And when I asked them, what's the state get out of this? You know, how much is the cost of electricity at the bus bar at the Beluga Power Station, where all our power is generated right now? And they said about 16.5 cents, 17. I said, so crying out loud, that's more than I'm paying at my house retail right now. You know, so the cost to write geothermal is very expensive. And then they came back and asked for more money. I told them to leave my office. But what we're doing, you know, as far as Cook Inlet gas, is through Ada, we've got the Endeavor now, which is one of the jackup rigs. And that can move around the inlet and hit some of these pockets that aren't currently being produced by the producers for whatever reason. You know, they have their own economics that they're engaged in that, but as Ada is a partner within the state to be able to do that, I think we'll be okay. Again, it just establishes the need for long-term energy. You know, if we're going to get industry to invest in this state, we need long-term reliable energy to lower the risk assessments for people companies that want to invest, like in Donnan, where it'll take billions of dollars of investment, you know, but they have to make sure when they're doing their risk assessment that they've got long-term energy. That's why it's so important, I think, to get a pipeline out of the largest gas fields in North America, which is in Prudhoe Bay, down to South Central. I think we'll be okay in Southeast right now. The Director of Oil and Gas says we've got a lot of gas out there. The drillers aren't developing it, and you know, I am concerned about that. You know, there's something going on there within the marketplace. I know that I've learned in this job that you trust but you verify. And so the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, which oversees all permitting out of Cook Inlet or sales of that, commercial sales, we don't have any contracts for gas sales out of Cook Inlet beyond 2015. And so I'm concerned about why the industry hasn't done that, you know. And we'll see I think we'll see some more gas exploration and some larger finds enough to keep us in. I'm not too concerned about the brownouts right now, but I think it really stresses the fact that we need an in-state gas pipeline down to South Central, long-term, reliable energy.
All right. Also, well, and back on to the budget issue. Whoops. Go figure, I end up bouncing off the thing. Gotta love technology sometimes. Okay, where'd it go? Okay, I found it again. Okay. Are we looking at budget decline this coming fiscal year, and do you foresee having to do drastic budget cuts?
Yes, I do.
With the major budget cuts, which cuts are needed? Well, if there are any major budget cuts were needed, which areas would you seek to do budget cuts first?
Well, because I have the Health and Social Services and Department of Transportation Public Facilities budget, those are the ones that I'm concentrated on right now because I'm familiar with those specifically and what they do. I think some of out of the $2.7 billion that's in Hess's budget right now, 1.4 of that is formula-driven program receipts, that federal funds that are coming in, and it's still regulated funds. So the 1.3 that's left over of unregulated funds is what I actually have to work with. I think a lot of the grants that are going out, hundreds of millions of dollars in grants that are going out for some of these programs, you know, they're social programs and behavioral health type grants. And I think that we're going to have to cut some of those. We just don't have the money to do it. You know, there's been a lot of commissions that have been started out there. We have commissions, and we've got what's the word I'm looking for? Like the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, and then councils is what I'm thinking. Councils are self-sustaining, so like our boards. I mean, the pharmacy board, other boards that are created like that. They collect dues from their members, so that they have a say in government that way, and that's good because those entities that are privately engaged should have a say on how the oversight is instead of the government.
Yeah.
You know, they're done through their own boards that way. But then there's commissions, and a lot of these commissions get created because it's really good politics. You know, well, let's create a commission on some feel-good program. Well, it's time to start looking at those commissions and ask them to make a determination, come up with some findings, what are your recommendations to the legislature, and close them out. You know, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on some of these commissions. Time to ask them what their recommendations are and close them out. You know, we just can't continue to afford these. I think that's probably some of the lowest hanging fruit right now, but it's going to beat the budget cuts like energy assistance. In the last 8 years, that's grown from 125% of federal poverty level to 200%. You know, and kind of, you think about an XY ratio access. So it's grown out in the amount of availability, you know, of funds from federal, but also who can apply. You know, and so cutting that back to maybe 150%, 140%, you know, that's going to take, that's right now, that's about 100, that's about 28 million, so we'll whack off probably 10, 15 million out of that. But not as many people are going to be able to qualify for energy assistance. We're broke. We just don't have the money. And then, but there's also the eligibility side of it, where you could have somebody who's making $130,000 a year, but qualifies in the month of February and still gets the energy assistance year round. That's just wrong. You know, and we can't afford programs. So there's an X and Y axis on that we're looking at. I think more specifically a lot of these grants, and right now that seems to be part of the unregulated funds that I'm looking at. DOT, you know, we've put a lot of money out there on capital projects. I think we need to pull some of those projects in and extend them out. We've put more money out there than we've got Alaskan companies to do the jobs. The Trunk Road extension, you know, I believe that went to a company out of Bellevue. We bid on that. $88 million project. They brought up all their own iron, a lot of their own iron, most of it, their own major personnel, and there was a few trucking company jobs around and stuff, but the majority of that went out of state. If we're going to take state capital money that's made off of what we get from our share of our resources, we need to make sure that's fed out there to keep Alaskan companies going, not companies from out of state. You know, I think that that's absolutely critical to Alaska's future. You know, is metering that money out there. You know, because we're limited in this state because of our weather, you know, construction seasons, and the number of companies that we have here. And so, you know, putting enough money out there to keep our Alaskan companies going, but we don't need any companies from out of state. I want to make sure that we keep Alaskans at work first.
Excellent. And are there any plans on the table to help influence broader diversification to the industries here in Alaska, so our state doesn't depend on just a few key industries for jobs and revenue?
Well, that's been my number one discussion for years, is diversification of our portfolio. Again, with 90% of our state revenue coming from oil, you ask any financial advisor, and diversification is the key to security. You know, our tail is hanging in the wind right now. We're so far out there, you know, and how that affects things, right to our bond rating, you know, and the ability to attract private industry investment, you know, into the state by lowering their risk assessment, so they want to invest into Alaska because we've invested in large infrastructure projects like dams or power lines or bridges and road construction like that, you know, so we can attract private industry investment because we've wisely used our capital money for infrastructure development to lower their risk. So that we can get projects like Donlin Creek going, the largest gold deposits in this state, in the world. Yet we send bags of rocks out of this state so others can smelt our ore from a lot of our mines. That's just nuts. And there's hardly a product that we don't do that, whether it's oil, gas, logging. You know, we continue to take Alaska resources and send them out of this state raw, instead of creating the mechanisms that we need in this state to use and add value so that we can create those jobs in Alaska. Other nations or countries, states, take our raw product, we add thousands of miles of transportation cost to them so they can create jobs out of them. We need to do that here.
Excellent. And then the last one.
And that'll diversify our royalty share, corporate taxes, and all that.
Yeah. And then with the last one, with states like Washington and Colorado ending prohibition on marijuana use, do you see this also happening in our state in the next couple of years?
I think so. I think so. I talked to the Department of Corrections and Public Safety about it, you know, how they feel on it. You know, and a lot of these people that are incarcerated because of laws that we've made, are they actually a danger to society? And when I talk to the commissioners, they don't feel so. You know, but they're still required to go to certain programs. You know, and then they get arrested for certain criminals uses for using marijuana, you know, for say, and maybe become a felon. And then we require these people to go to these behavioral health type programs, those grants that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yet, you know, if they want to quit using marijuana, that has to come from inside, not because they went to some program that the state said they have to go to. You know, I think we can knock off some of them programs. People can decide how they want to live their lives. It's not the state's business. If there's, you know, if you're growing and selling 130 pounds of marijuana, you know, probably you should be arrested. But, you know, as far as the smaller items, you know, smaller amounts, I really don't care personally, because that's based on discussions I've had with the commissioners of public safety and the, you know, the commissioners of corrections, and they say those inmates aren't a problem. You know, it's just not an issue for them.
All right. Well, thank you very much on that part. And